So I've got two articles here for you, which I think are interesting as part of the plot as to what is happening in Syria, in the Middle East right now, and really what will dictate what ends up happening. Now, the first article is about chemical attacks, and the second one here is the analysis. This is from haaretz.com, and what they're saying is the analysis is that the battle in Syria is between two superpowers. Who are those superpowers? Russia and the United States. And they're saying it's a direct proxy war, if there's such a thing as a direct proxy war, between the two superpowers. We know that in Bible prophecy, Russia is certainly left standing because they exist as an ally of Gog Magog, as a main component of Ezekiel 38. But where is the U.S.? Where is the United States? So when you have a battle between superpowers, we know that one of those superpowers is going to be taken out, and apparently, according to Bible prophecy, at least taken out of the ability to affect events in the Middle East, is the United States. There's only one show in Syria right now, a battle between two superpowers. Britain is moving its submarines. Russia and Syria are relocating their warplanes, and Saudi Arabia eyes joining the game. So Saudi Arabia wants to join the game against Iran, against Russia. Interesting. Aligning effectively with Israel, which is, again, prophetic, because we know Saudi Arabia will be blessed in the last days and called out as being one that is on the side of Israel, effectively. World waits for Trump to decide on Syrian strike. So he's still listening to evidence, and apparently he hasn't made any decisions yet. Jerusalem determined to block Iran and not get bogged down in Syria. So Israel's doing its own thing, just going after Iran, wherever they are. In Syria right now, they did some bombings, and Russia's holding back, not doing anything, because they know Israel, because they know Iran is an existential threat to Israel. And so that is the analysis of this particular Haaretz article. And I think that's interesting, because that's really what it ends up being, a superpower struggle. Well, let's look at what the situation was with the chemical weapons director of UN Weapons. Chemical attack in Syria was not by Assad. A Syrian military base was targeted by two F-15 fighters in response to that chemical attack. According to a farm director of UN Weapons, a recent chemical attack in Syria has nothing to do with Bashar Assad, and went on to suggest that the attack was an attempt to topple the Syrian leader. So it's a false flag, effectively. The purpose of it was to topple the Syrian leader. Dozens of people were killed in the town of Douma on Saturday, according to President Putin. So again, the leader saying, the people who know about this stuff saying, in fact, it was not Bashar Assad. And I think a lot of speculation / news is coming out really to the siding with the fact that this wasn't Bashar Assad. This was a false flag of some sort. I think most people would agree this is a false flag by somebody, whether it was the rebels trying to draw the U.S. back in, whether it was the U.S. Trying to have an excuse to go in and do something against Bashar Assad, or whether, I don't know, I don't see any reason why Russia would have a need for a false flag in Syria. But from all accounts, it appears that is the current situation. And I think that's why Trump hasn't ordered a tomahawk strike, because right now it is pretty nebulous. It does look like a false flag right now. It doesn't make any sense for Bashar Assad to all of a sudden drop chemical weapons just at the point in time when the U.S. is pulling out. It doesn't make any sense at all. And so this appears to be one of those that they're on the brink. They're building up military, but I think the evidence is going to come out that this just is not a true action of Bashar Assad. There's just no reason for it unless he's just asking for it, and that doesn't make any sense. So it's interesting nonetheless. So I think we're going to see in the next probably 24 hours what the outcome of this is. But again, it plays into Bible prophecy, because you see these two superpowers lining up. And we know one of them is left standing in the last days in Bible prophecy. And we know that one is Russia. We don't know where the U.S. is. We don't know if maybe an economic collapse happens, and so they can't deploy their military. Maybe a nuclear weapon happens, or some other attack. I think it's on the Dave Hobbs or something show, the Common Sense show. They're suggesting there's conspiracy that Russia's going to invade the U.S. with troops or something like that, which I don't believe is true. But there's all these sorts of speculative things out there, conspiracy theories out there about what happens, and we don't know. The Bible doesn't say what happens to the United States, or what happens to North America, or what happens to Western countries and Western leaders. All we know is that in the Bible, in the last days, in Ezekiel 38, in Isaiah 17, in the book of Revelation, in Daniel, etc., you don't really see any strong position or involvement of any Western nation. All you see is Gog Magog. You see Middle Eastern nations. Basically what you see is dictatorship nations, communist nations, military rule nations. And if those are the only nations standing in the last days, that kind of tells me that maybe an economic collapse is what has occurred, because the only nations that will be standing with their and that will be able to do anything with their military is the nations ruled by the military, are the communist governments who rule by fear and force. And that's what you have in Russia with China and the Middle Eastern countries. Are ruled by kings and military forces on their civilians. So even if they are starving, even if an economic collapse does occur, well, their military is still going to be going. So that's kind of what I think the trigger event is. I think the next event is an economic collapse, which takes all Western nations effectively out of the end-time prophetic picture, weakens them significantly to a point where Gog Magog, Iran, etc., can now do stuff because the Western nations aren't going to come against them like U.S. is doing right now. Something takes them out of the picture, and I think that's a complete and total worldwide economic collapse, which really only ends up affecting significantly Western/free countries and powers. So it's my speculation on that. I guess we'll see how it turns out. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video.